All right, guys, we are back with Rule 3 of Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life and Antidote to Chaos. Rule 3, to continue in our series, is make friends with people who want the best for you. Very important chapter. I feel like I say that about every single chapter, but very important chapter. So, Jordan starts the chapter by talking about his upbringing, his childhood, where he grew up. He grew up in Fairview, Alberta, in Canada. And it was a small town. He said it's a small town of, I think he says here, about 6,000 people. And he talks about the winters, the bitterly cold, like 40 or even over below winters there in Fairview. And how, especially during the winters, there's like nothing to do. It's awful. Everyone's in a bad mood. Everyone wants to stay inside, of course, and the only things the kids can really do when it's that cold, and especially in that small of a town when there's nothing really to do in the first place, is to misbehave, right? There's nothing really to do. He says in the chapter here, these younger kids, they're all, younger kids and teenagers, they were kind of like itching for something to do, something to work on or work toward, some way to be productive. But since there was nothing to do in this town, all they did was party. Talks about the parties that they had at different friends' house and how people they're jumping out of trees and like almost killing themselves, and some people are getting in fights with each other. They're drinking like crazy. And Peterson says here in the chapter, when he reflects on the parties that he went to when he was a kid, that he was never really a fan of the parties that he went to. He didn't really go to a whole lot because he didn't really like them. And the reason why, he says here, maybe I can actually find it here. Yeah, right here. I didn't like teenage parties. I don't remember them nostalgically. They were dismal affairs. The lights were kept low. That kept self-consciousness to a minimum. The overloud music made conversation impossible. There was little to talk about in any case. There were always a couple of the town's psychopaths attending. Everybody drank and smoked too much. A dreary and oppressive sense of aimlessness hung over such occasions, and nothing ever happened, unless you count the time my too quiet classmate drunkenly began to brandish his fully loaded 12-gauge shotgun, or the time the girl I later married contemptuously insulted someone while he threatened her with a knife, or the time another friend climbed a large tree, swung out on a branch and crashed flat onto his back, half dead, right beside the campfire we'd started at its base, followed precisely a minute later by his half-wit sidekick. So that gives you an idea of the parties he was at. I really liked the part here where he talked about how everyone kept the lights dim, very low, to keep self-consciousness to a minimum, and the music was super loud to make conversation impossible, like he says. I thought that was an interesting observation there. And so he talks a bit about how there was nothing to do in his hometown, how it was bitterly cold in the winters and things like that, and that was the reason why kids just got into trouble all the time and did things they probably shouldn't have been doing. And he goes on to talk about how, as everyone started growing up in their town, he said when people got to be about the age of 12 or so was when they roughly figured out where they were headed in life, a rough direction, if they were going to be staying in Fairview, Alberta their whole lives, or going somewhere else, moving away from the small town and making something of themselves. And so he said at around age 12 or so, kids in town knew if they were going off to college or some trade school or something that was going to get them out of town or kind of stay there and fester, right? And so he goes on to talk about how after high school he goes to Grand Prairie Regional College, about 90 miles away from where he lives, meets some new friends. They do a bunch of things while they're at school. They ran the student union, as he says here. They started a school newspaper. They were meeting their professors, and they were really working hard. And what he thought was that they were really doing well for themselves. Peterson knew he was, and he was looking around to the friends around him at his social circle, his support circle of friends, and everyone else seemed to be moving up, right? They were aiming upward, and he liked that a lot. So, following this, a few years later, he is living with his sister, and they're living in, I believe it's a city called Edmonton. In a separate place, and Jordan's finishing up his undergraduate degree, and his sister is studying to be a nurse. He's living in her apartment, and they're doing pretty well for themselves. They're upward aiming, right? They're really working on their lives. One day, Jordan has a friend, is invited over. He invites over a friend to his place, to his sister's apartment, and his friend brings one of his friends, and these people who Jordan thought were going to be upward aiming, who were really trying, what Jordan thought at least, were really trying to improve themselves when they were young. They had this youthful ambition, right? They had aspirations and goals, and they were working hard toward things. When they showed up to Peterson's sister's door, and Peterson opens the door, that's not what he sees at all. He sees his friend who's really let himself go in a lot of ways. He's put on more weight. He's kind of like balding. He just looks very old and tired. He's working a job. I believe he says here like some kind of job, lawn mowing and casual landscaping, which Peterson says here, which would have been fine for a part-time university student or for someone who couldn't do better, but which was wretchedly low-end as a career for an intelligent person. And so we talked about these two guys who came to their apartment, how they're not doing well. They hadn't really been living up to their goals and aspirations. And Peterson clearly doesn't want those kinds of people in his life, right? And this is an example that he uses later about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who want the best for you and are aiming upward and encouraging themselves and others to do the same, right? And so he goes on after this story to talk about, like I said, the importance of surrounding yourself with people who want the best for you. And he talks here in a section called Rescuing the Damned, one of the headings here, about a little more than halfway through the chapter, about trying to help people who are in these lowly positions in life. And he talks about the potential danger of helping people in these lowly positions in life. He says here, I don't exactly have the quote in front of me right now, but he's talking about how sometimes you can try and help people and you'll actually end up hurting yourself. You'll end up hurting them by trying to help them and hurt yourself as well. Because some people are down in these lowly positions and they're okay with it. Or even if they're not okay with it, they don't want help. For some reason, for one reason or another. And he lays out many different hypotheses here. Of course, there's not one universal answer that's applicable to everyone in subjectively or objectively bad situations. But he lays out a number of educated guesses, a number of hypotheses here as to why people stay in these lowly positions. And he says, he talks about the potential danger of trying to help all these people. Sometimes you might be trying to help a good friend of yours out of a rut, and they may be just trying to exploit you. Or maybe, in a kind of different sense of this situation here, you're trying to help them because, by comparison, you look like a much better person. Standing side by side to them, you look like you're a genius compared to your lowly friend, right? So maybe your intentions aren't exactly the purest at heart, and you don't even know it. You might not even be conscious. You might not even be aware of that. You may really be convincing yourself, deluding yourself into thinking that, yeah, definitely, I'm helping this person. It takes someone who is so self-sacrificing, someone who really cares about people, someone who's very generous and brave and strong, someone with a shoulder to cry on for friends. It takes a good moral person to do these things. But that might not really be why you're doing it. You might be telling yourself that you are, but as Jordan says in the chapter here, you may really be doing that just to try and show other people how good of a person you are by comparison to that other person. Or you might be helping your friend because it actually makes you feel better. Because while you're just kind of halfway helping them, you can smile to yourself and tell yourself and brag to yourself like, oh man, I'm so much better than them, right? And if you're doing that, if you fall into one of these categories, then no one's really getting helped. If anything, everyone's just getting hurt in the process. And so, like I said earlier, he ends the chapter by talking about the importance, like the title suggests, of surrounding yourself with people, making friends with people who want the best for you. And in the last heading, the last section here of the chapter called A Reciprocal Arrangement, he says, if you surround yourself with people who support your upward aim, they won't tolerate your cynicism and destructiveness. They'll instead encourage you when you do good for yourself and others, and punish you carefully when you don't. This will help bolster your resolve to do what you should do in the most appropriate and careful manner. People who aren't aiming up will do the opposite. They'll offer a former smoker a cigarette and a former alcoholic a beer. They'll withdraw their presence or support or actively punish you for it. They'll override your accomplishment with a past action, real or imaginary, of their own. Maybe they're trying to test you to see if your resolve is real, to see if you're genuine. But mostly they're dragging you down because your new improvements cast their faults in an even dimmer light. So, to paraphrase that, he's talking about how important it is to surround yourself with people who really care about you, who want to lift you up, and are encouraging people around them and are upward aiming. Because as he says here, these people may get really jealous and bitter and angry because they see you trying to improve yourself and they're not willing or they're not able to do so for themselves. And so instead of trying to encourage you and lift you up, they just want to bring you down to their level, which is what he's saying here. So he says at the end here, it's for this reason that every good example is a fateful challenge and every hero a judge. Michelangelo's great perfect marble David cries out to its observer, "You could be more than you are." When you dare aspire upward, you reveal the inadequacy of the present and the promise of the future. Then you disturb others in the depths of their souls when they understand that their cynicism and immobility are unjustifiable. You play Abel to their Cain. You remind them that they ceased caring not because of life's horrors, which are undeniable, but because they don't want to lift the world up onto their shoulders where it belongs. Don't think that it's easier to surround yourself with good, healthy people than with bad, unhealthy people. It's not. A good, healthy person is an ideal. It requires strength and daring to stand up near such a person. Have some humility. Have some courage. Use your judgment and protect yourself from too uncritical compassion and pity. Make friends with people who want the best for you.